From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. We hope that you and yours are safe, sheltering in place in a comfortable environment, and we look forward to meeting you back in the yacht club just as soon as conditions permit. Now, many of us who grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area have all our lives looked across the bay at what we think of as Treasure Island. The big island, YERBA BUENA, is joined by this beautiful little stretch of man-made island called Treasure Island. We're going to hear today all about the glamorous history and the exciting future of Treasure Island from Fei Tsen, president of the Treasure Island Development Authority, and her colleague Lauren Stahl, senior associate and landscape architect at CMG Landscape Architecture. So Fei, welcome to Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thank you, Ron. I'm very glad to be able to join you and your audience today.
So tell us, first of all, where did the name Treasure Island come from? I've been hearing it all my life. I don't know where it came from.
Well, there's many stories as to where the name came from. Some say that it's named because there was gold in the bay, and when they dredged up the mud to create Treasure Island, some of that gold was there, so it was called Treasure Island. And then some, I think it's a reference to the exhibition that was there and how marvelous that was. So it became an island full of fantasy and romance too. And so therefore the name Treasure Island. What I would like to do is to give you a little bit of the history of Treasure Island, which is actually two islands, it's YERBA BUENA Island and Treasure Island. What is going on now under construction and what the future of these islands are going to be. And what a great addition it is to the city of San Francisco. The Treasure Island commands a really unique location in the San Francisco Bay with spectacular views of the city and Golden Gate Bridge. Treasure Island is a jewel in the middle of the bay. It has one of the few protected coves on the bay, Clipper Cove, and perhaps some of you, especially because you're sailors, have anchored there and even spent a night in that protected cove. What is the history of this island and what will its future be? Treasure Island was one of the most visible of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's WPA projects. It was constructed by the Army Corps of Engineers with mud dredged from the bay. Started in 1936, it was built in an era of engineering feats, including the construction of the Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge. It was an age of optimism. The island served briefly as a landing base for the celebrated Pan Am fleet of Clipper seaplanes. In 1939, it became the site of the World's Fair, the Golden Gate International Exposition. For the World's Fair, a dazzling Art Deco city of towers, gardens, goddesses, and statues with light effects and exhibition halls that were created to showcase the rise of California and San Francisco as an economic, political, and cultural force in the Pacific. There were musical events, acrobatics, and entertainment, and new businesses showing off their wares. That age of optimism was cut short by World War II, and in 1941, Treasure Island was transformed into a naval station as part of the American military response to the war. The island became a major training and education center with 4.5 million personnel shipped overseas from Treasure Island. Few residents of San Francisco set foot on the island in the 40 years that it was a military base. In 1997, the naval station was closed and Treasure Island reverted back to the city. The Navy was charged with the remediation and cleanup of the island, which has been a 24-year effort. So how do we go from the past to the future? This being San Francisco, it took us more than a decade of public discussion on how best to use the island. That 10-year effort culminated in a visionary award-winning master plan that the city adopted in 2011. The Treasure Island Development Authority, of which I'm president, is the public agency overseeing the implementation of the adopted plans. The plan for redevelopment calls for a spectacular new extension of San Francisco. It adds much needed housing, both affordable and market rate, over 8,000 units eventually over time. But a most remarkable feature of the plan, and truly a gift to the public, is the creation of more than 300 acres of parks, plazas, promenades, neighborhood parks with incredible views, wetlands and wild natural areas, sports fields, and an urban agricultural farm, all connected by bicycle lanes and pedestrian trails. It will be the biggest addition to the city's park system since the creation of Golden Gate Park. The full build-out will take many years and maybe will not even be completed in my lifetime. But what we gain from the development is the open space and the affordable housing. This is the public realm that is being created at Treasure Island. And it is a tremendous opportunity to create these public spaces, the streets, the trails, the parks, the open spaces, and to create them so that we can make them welcoming, inviting, robust, accessible, and also to make people aware of how unique the landscape, the natural landscape, and its ecology are. Our Treasure Island plan has won international recognition. It is the largest development in the world to receive LEED Platinum certification for neighborhood development. It received an award from the Clinton Climate Initiative, and its plan to address sea level rise has been adopted as a model by BCDC for all communities around the Bay. Why is the public realm so important? The public space is our most democratic institution. Everyone is welcome and everyone is equal in our public spaces. And during this time of the pandemic, we have seen how important it is that to have open spaces and connections to the sky and to the water and to nature. It's important to our physical and mental health. Eventually, Treasure Island, as I said, will have 8,000 new housing units, some 20,000 people, certainly important for a region that desperately needs more housing. But the cornerstones of our success, at least from the public's perspective, will be that we build this new neighborhood sustainably, that we build in affordability of the house, that we build open space and parks that become a destination for the city at large, but also for the region and even nationally and internationally, and that we build a whole community that is welcoming and inclusive. So one begins with the idea of sustainability, that the island can be a self-sustaining natural ecosystem, where there's water that's reclaimed from the wastewater, it's used for irrigation, that there's fresh food that can be grown and given to the community. It is a whole ecosystem. And we have a fawn park that is being planned for the center of the island, where we foster innovative urban agriculture and we start a native plant nursery. We plant as much as possible native species and have a habitat management plan. We create wetlands that are fed by recycled stormwater and purified by aquatic plants. We connect with the rest of the region. We ring the island with bike pathways. We have a bicycle circulation system that it will be envied in the rest of the region, a system of separated Class 1 cycle tracks, Class 2 bike lanes, and shared bike routes covers both islands and gives a range of options and experiences for cyclists of all types and ages. And you can see in the yellow is the two-way cycle track. You can see that. And Class 2 is in the dotted yellow. And dotted orange is the mixed bike pedestrian pathway, and blue is the shared public way. We also have a system for transit, public transit, where Muni from San Francisco to Treasure Island will provide buses, which actually it takes only 7 minutes from downtown to Treasure Island, and AC Transit to the East Bay. And we're exploring the use of autonomous shuttles for on-island transit, if viable. We have shared public ways as part of our planning, which is a very innovative way to use our streets. It is an innovative concept that has been found to be a safer alternative and is widely utilized in European cities. The shared public way prioritizes the pedestrian, but also allows bicyclists and slow-moving cars on a narrow street. The narrow, more intimate scale of the shared street built for the pedestrian is a radical shift from streets that are built for cars. And this is the new ferry terminal. We are building a new ferry landing and terminal. The ferry landing has been complete. It is a romantic way to arrive and also very efficient. It is only a 10-minute ride from the ferry building to Treasure Island by boat. And we will have privately run ferries starting actually in February, next month, in 2022. And then WYL, which is the agency which runs the public ferries, will take over in 2025. The art program is also funded through 1% of the development costs, which in the initial years will generate about $15 million. And we have put together an arts master plan for incorporating the arts at Treasure Island. This is the first chosen piece called Infinity by the artist Hiroshi Sugimoto. It is a sculpture that rises 66 feet in the air from a 40-foot wide stone base to a metal spire that is 1.5 inches at the top. It becomes invisible as infinity is. And during the solstice, the spire casts a shadow exactly on a boulder specifically chosen by the artist, Sugimoto. In the meantime, Treasure Island is a construction site. These photos were taken a few months ago, and even since then, there has been lots of progress. But you can see that the streets and infrastructure are being put in. The ferry landing has been completed. A new freeway ramp from the Bay Bridge has also been completed. And from the Bay Bridge, there is a bicycle route which connects to the Bay Trail. This is causeway linking Treasure Island with YERBA BUENA Island, and a rendering of the causeway as it will look when finished. This is the old marina, and a rendering of the new marina and the promenade next to Clipper Cove. There's new roads and Hilltop Park on YERBA BUENA Island under construction, and also in construction of views of the first new luxury housing development on YBI on YERBA BUENA Island. And this are the renderings of what that housing will look like. This is the first phase, which will be completed actually by the end of this year. Beautiful common area amenities, modern lobby, terrace courtyards, a clubhouse with swimming pool. And the YERBA BUENA housing developments will be luxurious with spectacular views, but I am most excited about the new affordable housing that is being built. The first underway is Museo May, a 169 units of supported housing being built for formerly homeless veterans. It is being built by Swords to Plowshares and CCDC, the Chinatown Community Development Center, a nonprofit housing development. Given that the history of Treasure Island has as a military base, I think it's very fitting that the first project will be for veterans. So speaking from the public sector side, I see our role at the Treasure Island Development Authority as being stewards for the public realm. We have an incredible opportunity to create a new neighborhood of San Francisco. I've asked Lauren to go into more detail on our open spaces, parks, and trails, and we will also discuss sea level rise and how Treasure Island is addressing this issue.
Terrific. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Fei, for that really great introduction into the development project. As they mentioned, my name is Lauren Stahl, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of the parks and open spaces on Treasure and YERBA BUENA Island. Some of you may not be familiar with the term, but I am a landscape architect, and landscape architects are the designers of our public realm. So just as architects design buildings, landscape architects design the parks, plazas, and streetscapes that stitch a city together. CMG has been working on the Treasure Island redevelopment for 20 years and has partnered with many, many people. So working with Fei and the Development Authority and other city agencies like city planning and public works, and then a whole team of other professionals like civil engineers, shoreline engineers, ecologists, other teams of landscape architects and architects. And the islands do have a really incredible setting in the middle of the bay. There are amazing views of San Francisco, of the Golden Gate Bridge, there's atmospheric fog, and it's all kind of a landscape architect's dream. And the urban development is limited to the southern part of Treasure Island and some smaller development parcels on YERBA BUENA Island, which really leaves a lot of room for parks and open space. And as Fei mentioned, the parks are adding around 300 acres of new open space for San Francisco residents. And stepping back from the island for just a minute, this transformation of our waterfront is not isolated to Treasure Island. So throughout San Francisco, our waterfronts are really in transition. So in the last 120 years, they were really quickly built up for a military and industrial era that was actually quite short. So starting its decline in the 1960s, after containerized ships needed deeper ports, and as the military bases became less critical. So Hunters Point, the Presidio, and Treasure Island were all decommissioned in the 90s, and we've seen a pretty remarkable transition of our waterfront in the last 20 years or so. So the Giants Ballpark opened around 2000, Crissy Field opened in 2001, and the Ferry Building opened in 2003. And with some of those projects, San Francisco's relationship to the Bay really began to transform from one of industry to more access for people and more access for nature. And over the next 20 years, projects like Treasure Island, Mission Rock, and Mission Bay and others will really continue that transformation. Which brings us back to Treasure Island. So as you can see in this plan, all of the green areas represent space that has been set aside for people and for nature. So that green space is woven through the neighborhoods and is along the entire waterfront. The open space will take many forms. So there are smaller neighborhood parks that are geared toward the families that will live nearby. There are larger parks and recreational spaces that will be regional destinations. And then there are more urban spaces like plazas, which is where I'm going to start today. So there are 3 historic buildings on Treasure Island that make up the historic core. And so the new ferry terminal that Fei mentioned will drop visitors in front of one of them, Building 1. I think Fei mentioned this, there's the new ferry terminal here, and that we do anticipate that most people will be coming to the island by ferry since it is a really short 10-minute ride from the ferry building. And so this will be most people's first stop on the island. This plaza was designed by AECOM Landscape Architecture, and then behind it is another landscape area designed by Andrea Cochran Landscape Architecture that's framed by Building 1. So we call this area the intermodal transit hub, meaning that as you arrive, there will be wayfinding signage that will orient you to a variety of options on how to get around. So as you arrive, there will be bike share and bike rentals available nearby. There are walking paths along the waterfront that will lead to other parks. There's also a shuttle where you can board or shuttle stops where you can board the on-island shuttle to be taken to the other parks and neighborhoods. And then as you step off the ferry, you can link right up with the Bay Trail, which will connect with that 5-mile fairly flat loop around the island. Tiburon and Marin have become a destination for those biking and ferrying. We believe Treasure Island will be a similar destination, with people being able to bring their own bikes or rent a bike on the island and then make the kind of easy loop around the island with really incredible views in the setting in the middle of the bay. Beyond the waterfront plaza, there are other park spaces that we see as being regional destinations. So like Crissy Field, we imagine they will draw visitors from around the bay to enjoy the open space near the water. Along the west side of the island will be CITYSIDE Waterfront Park, and when it's finished, it's going to be a half-mile long park divided into rooms with different uses for each. The park will be a gradient spanning from the urban on the southern side, so you can see where it links up with the ferry terminal, to the wild, where it meets up with the natural and habitat areas planned to the north. It will have more event spaces and group picnic areas on the southern end and will become more quiet and immersive toward the north. These are some other character images of that park. So there'll be coastal plantings along the bay, event lawns with a stage for small outdoor concerts or movie nights, and then stormwater treatment will also be a big function of this park as well. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. The park will have really expansive views of the San Francisco skyline and Golden Gate Bridge. It will have the Bay Trail along the waterfront, and we imagine that this will be a really great setting for family picnics or to enjoy outdoor concerts. And as I mentioned, there will be stormwater treatment basins lining the edges of the park. And so the state of California requires that all new construction projects clean the majority of the rainwater runoff through means like these rain gardens, or what we call them biotreatment areas. So rather than having each residential building or street incorporate small treatment areas, Treasure Island has an innovative system of centralized treatment that collects water from throughout the streets and the various parcels and parks, and then it gets released into a series of planted depressions where it filters through the soil and plant roots and is cleaned before it filters out pollutions before that water is either infiltrated into the groundwater or released out into the bay. And so that process both filters the water from pollutants and creates habitat. And these treatment areas are green infrastructure, but we also think they can be very beautiful. So this is an image of a running path around a similar treatment area that we designed in San Mateo. So coming down in scale, the Parks and Open Space system also has many neighborhood parks woven into the communities. So most of the housing projects will be multifamily buildings. And so these parks will act as the shared yard for the residents. There are spaces, they're the spaces where we imagine residents will bring their coffee or read the news, or where families will bring their kids to play. The East Side Common is a long, narrow space spanning 6 blocks of the eastern neighborhood. It has continuous walking and bike paths along either side, and then a series of different park rooms that have different types of uses like playgrounds, garden spaces, and dog parks. And here's a rendering of the dog park that we have designed for that space. So if you do have a dog, you probably know that dog parks, like playgrounds, are some of the most social spaces within a city. It's the places where neighbors routinely see each other and can get to know each other and hear about the neighborhood news. They're real community-making spaces, and so that's why we think that they're a great fit for these neighborhood parks. And then the last type of space is the habitat and natural areas, which encompass a good portion of the northern part of Treasure Island, and then also some of YERBA BUENA Island. So because it was not man-made, we think of YERBA BUENA Island as being the more natural island. It still contains some pockets of intact habitats. It has a sandy beach on Clipper Cove. It has beautiful old heritage trees like these buckeyes. And large portions of Buena Island are governed by a habitat management plan. So that plan was developed by ecologists, and we work with the San Francisco Department of the Environment on restoration projects to bring back the native ecology. So you can see some of the habitats found on the island on this slide. And what the habitat management plan has looked like on the ground is a variety of different things. So during the construction process, we were able to save some of the native oak trees that were growing on the island as they needed to be moved for infrastructure work. They were boxed up and have actually been living in a nursery on the island for the last several years. And we've just begun the process of replanting some of these into some of the parks under construction. We also reused some of the wood from trees that had to be cut down. So much of the island was pretty densely planted with invasive eucalyptus trees. And as those trees were removed to make way for new housing and roads, we reused some of that wood. So we worked with a mill up in Marin and created a suite of rustic furniture out of those trees. So this is some of those benches that will be placed around the parks and trails of Buena Island. We also partnered with Literacy for Environmental Justice, or LEDGE, which is a nonprofit group from San Francisco, to develop a native plant nursery on the island. And so employees from LEDGE and the San Francisco Department of the Environment salvage native plants from around Treasure Island and Buena Island and are growing them in this nursery, which allows us to preserve the biodiversity on the island. And we're in construction now. So this photo is actually from about 2 months ago. And this area is going to be a stormwater treatment garden with paths and new plantings around it. And the different color flags that you see here each represent different species of plants that will be in the garden. So our team goes on site and reviews the plant layout of all these flags before the plants from the nursery are then delivered and put into the ground. So each one of these flags that you see will then be replaced with a plant like one of these that you see on the screen. So the Dutchman's pipevine that you see in the middle is actually the only food source for the caterpillars of the pipevine swallowtail butterfly. And those butterflies are actually some of the first new residents on the island. So some of the butterflies already found and laid their eggs on the plants that we were growing in the nursery. So before we actually got the habitat and restoration plants into the ground, we were already, attracting new animals and creating habitat.
Wonderful.
And around the newly restored habitat, we'll also have a trail system that will allow people to explore the island and the natural beauty. So the trail system is comprised of several different segments, and people can make up to a 2-mile loop around the island. So this is a place where residents can get some exercise. So some of the trails, some of the hills are pretty steep on the island. And then there's also just really incredible views of the city and the bay. So it's easier to imagine that type of restoration happening on Buena Island, but we do have similar ambitions for the northern part of Treasure Island as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we have examples of this type of transformation already along our waterfront. So we know we can take post-industrial spaces like Crissy Field and turn them into really wonderful recreational places with real habitat value. And I think Fei showed this image, but this is what we think the northern island of Treasure Island, or northern part of Treasure Island, may look like some years down the road. So this park space is in the last phase of development. And so eventually its form will be determined by how the development team decides to deal with the process of sea level rise. And there is a process for that laid out in the island's adaptive management plan. So the first phase of the development on the island is being protected against 36 inches of sea level rise. And the first phase was raised by several feet, and then there was more riprap added where needed to protect the shoreline. The adaptive management plan requires that the development authority monitor the actual rate of sea level rise on a regular basis and then make plans to adapt to rising seas in advance. And the adaptation could take several forms and take different forms around the island. So closer to the historic buildings and the new residents on the southern part of the island, it could be raising the shoreline, it could be adding seawalls. But then on the northern part of the island, where there is not going to be development, retreat is an option that we could consider. As I mentioned, so much of the shoreline of the bay was developed over the last 100 years. And during that process, we lost a lot of really critical wetland habitat around the San Francisco Bay. And so sea level rise has the potential to be really destructive, but if we plan for it properly, it could also be an opportunity to restore some of what we lost to development over the last 100 years. So there parts of the northern end of Treasure Island could well look like this someday. So the project of Treasure Island has been going on for the past 20 years, and we're really looking forward to the next 20 years. We are excited to see the first new residential buildings and park spaces built, and for the people of San Francisco to adopt these spaces as their own and to see them take on a new life as part of our collective park system.
Terrific. Thank you, Lauren. By the way, impressive, exciting restoration, renovation, really total enhancement of Treasure Island. What's the budget?
Well, it's hard to say because this is a multi-decade project. Not all of it is going to be built this year or even 10 years from now. It's going to take some time. And it also depends on the economic cycles for building. The housing is actually the way that we're able to finance the improvements that are happening on the island, because the increase in tax revenues, basically the tax increments that come from the housing development and the retail development and other commercial development, that increment is used for the bonding and the financing of the infrastructure and the parks.
In the 1939 World's Fair, how many people came to Treasure Island in those days? Do we know?
It was actually, surprisingly, it was very well attended. There were at least 1.5 million visitors over the time that the fair was open. And the fair was open for about a year and a half, because it was started in 1939, but the Navy took over the island in 1941.
You mentioned earlier that the Navy and the military had cleaned up the island. When did they finish cleaning up or remediating the toxic stuff that must have been there before they removed it? When did that get finished?
It's not finished yet. There's still work that is underway, but it has been a 25-year effort that they've done the remediation. There's certain parts of the island that is still being remediated today. But the areas where the development will take place for the housing, that area has all been remediated.
So it's interesting to think, Crissy Field, people originally thought when Crissy Field converted from military to civilian use, that nobody would be able to clean up all the toxic waste that was there from having an airport, et cetera. But as everybody knows, Crissy Field is a beautiful public park access right now. And with the most recent enhancements in the Presidio, it's hard to even imagine that people were skeptical about the remediation of post-military environment. So yes. I wish you guys, I expect the same to happen to Treasure Island, which is exciting.
Yeah, well, I think that change of use, to be able to redevelop something that was industrial, that was military use, and change it to recreational use and housing, it's for a more productive use and more intensive use by people. I think that's a great thing. And it's done very carefully, so that there's a lot of eyes on it, both from the state as well as the city's Department of Public Health. So the Navy is responsible and charged with the cleanup and the remediation, but it is with a lot of scrutiny that is from the state level as well as the city level.
So Lauren, will the island be importing water, or talk to me about the ability to hold on to rainwater and other water on the island?
Yeah, so the island will be hooked up to the city's water system, but there is going to be a water treatment plant being built on the northern part of the island. So there is an existing water treatment plant out there now that will be decommissioned once the new plant is built. And the new plant will supply recycled water for both the vertical parcels. So it'll supply water for things like toilet flushing and other functions that you can use recycled water for within the buildings. And then it will also supply water for the irrigation in the park system. And so that on-island treatment plant will actually be able to supply kind of all of the water for those functions on the island once it gets up and running.
I think that this is a very exciting part of our sustainability plan. And the reason, and it was a very forward-thinking plan when it was adopted in 2011, to think that we would recycle the stormwater, we would recycle the wastewater, treat it, and then use it again for irrigation. It has not been done in other parts of the city because, of course, the city has very old infrastructure. But here's our chance with the new island, a new development to do what is right and what is cutting edge. And sustainability was really a goal that we embraced from the very beginning.
In the year 2000 and 2001, a colleague of mine lived on Yerba Buena, and our offices were at Sansom Market. And what was incredibly impressive was that he could get to work like that. I mean, he literally could get to work. I know it sounds impossible, but he could get to work in less than 15 minutes because he could be talking to one on his phone. And before I knew it, he would be actually in the office. And my son-in-law threw a big party for a big phone company on the island and staged a big concert. And the views from the island of the city and the bay literally are, as you said, they're actually spectacular. It's like actually amazing. There aren't actually views in San Francisco that compare with the views from Treasure Island and Yerba Buena. So
that is so true.
Yeah, both with a buddy who threw some dinner parties at his place and with my son-in-law who threw this big party for 1,000 people on the island. In both cases, I was amazed. Another friend had a birthday party on the island and right on the shore facing San Francisco. That was an amazing event too, as well, had beautiful views. So you guys have an incredible gem to work with, and congratulations for it. Looks like a really visionary and also super practical view. I love the open space, urban space view of the environment. As you go farther north and west, you get more rough and open, and I like that. Did I hear correctly? Did you say it's a 5-mile lap if you're to go around 5.2 or something that miles?
Yeah, it's about 5 miles around.
Yeah, okay. And let me just say, Ron, that it is true that it is so easy to get from Treasure Island to downtown. And actually, I've ridden the bus. We're trying to get people out of the vehicles. We don't want to have 8,000 more vehicles going onto the Bay Bridge, which is why we're trying to make sure this is such a transit-oriented development. So we've got the connections with the bus, the Muni, and it is only, believe it or not, 7 minutes from the island, from the first administration building to downtown, only 7 minutes by bus. So one of the features that we have is really having a transportation plan, trying to get people who will live on the island, making sure that they have their monthly pass so that they can take the ferry, that they can take the bus, that they can take the shuttle around the island, or they can walk, or they can bike, but that there are alternatives to the vehicle, to the car. And that is a very important part of our overall plan.
So can you use Metro Transit right now? Is the Muni going to
Yes, yes, the Muni is going to Treasure Island right now. And also we're connecting over to the East Bay, not just to San Francisco, but to the East Bay, because we are also bringing AC Transit, the East Bay system, so that they come to Treasure Island as well.
So the ferry, the same ferry terminal, but it'll go around the southern end of the island and go to the east.
No. The AC Transit is a bus system. It's East Bay bus system, but the only ferry terminal will be from the ferry building. There'll be a direct link from the ferry building on the mainland to Treasure Island, and that trip is only about 10 minutes on the water. So it's a very convenient way. People think, oh, it's very far, and you have to have a car to get there. But actually, I think the most romantic way to come to the island is going to be by ferry over the water.
Yeah.
And I think it is important to note that all of the new residents are within a 15-minute walk of the ferry terminal as well. So once you arrive on the island, you still don't need a car to get around. There's great walking infrastructure. There's all the bike lanes that Fei pointed out, so it's very easy to get to from the ferry terminal to your destination on the island. And there's also the on-island shuttle. So, those who are unable to or don't want to, bad weather, you can also take the shuttle to get where you're going.
Talk about the shuttle, please. Where will it go?
Well, there is a shuttle planned to go right around the island. And actually, we're also looking into autonomous driven shuttles. We are looking into that possibility. And who knows, maybe in 10 years' time or 5, because of the rapid pace of change in our transit systems, we may have autonomous vehicles for those shuttles.
So how high are the paths above current sea level, the walking paths?
It's quite a bit above right now. I'm going to get this number wrong if I say it off the top of my head, but as currently planned, so some of the new park spaces that we're building have been raised almost about 3 feet, not quite. I think some of them are more on 18 inches, and then so that's all of the kind of park and development spaces will be raised higher than they currently are. But it also depends on what side of the island you're on. So the western side that gets more of the wave action as the waves come from the Golden Gate requires more protection, than the eastern side of the island where it's more protected and there's less wave runoff. So the number of feet that we actually, that's not stopping. The number of feet that we actually have to raise the island changes depending on where you are, but it will all be protected for the same level of sea level rise.
So Fei and Lauren, the yacht club has an island up in the Delta called Tinsley Island. And the life of that island changed beginning in the 80s when we built a berm around the outside edge of it. That berm is now like about 7 or 8 feet above sea level in the Delta, depending upon the tide, of course, but that's about what it is. And that berm became a walkway so people can take laps around the island. And it actually is really a fun addition to the island. As a person who went there before the berm and now after the berm, I can see what an advantage it is. That berm, we just raised the berm up. We didn't raise the island, we just raised the berm up. So I've seen it in practice where you can raise up a walkway or a path, and actually just enhances the view a little bit. It protects the inside of the island more, and prevents the danger that you might otherwise have with some amounts of sea level rise.
And in fact, that's what on the southern side of the island, we do have a seawall. We planned for 3.5 feet of sea level rise, which in 2011 was almost inconceivable. People weren't even talking much about sea level rise, and one couldn't predict, are we talking about 1.5 feet, 3.5 feet? Is it going to be 6? Is it going to be 9? And so there was no point in building for 6 feet or 9 feet if you didn't know exactly what the numbers were going to be. So that's why we put together the adaptive management plan, which is actually financially, we're setting aside reserves to deal with future sea level rise, so that as the sea level goes up, we have the money, the resources to be able to intervene.
So I saw paths on the YERBA BUENA Island as well. Are those paths accessible now? I have friends, and I frequently walk in Marin County in Mount Tam, and I thought to myself, whoa, we could take a quick trip over to the city, and I have friends in the city. We could meet on TI and go for a walk. Are those paths on YERBA BUENA Island walkable now?
I would say no. There's a lot of construction happening on the island right now, so a lot of YERBA BUENA Island isn't really accessible to the public. Okay. The goal is that the first park spaces will be opening later in 2022.
Okay.
But I would say, yes, I agree. It's really, the island right now is a big construction site, as you could see by some of my photos. But it is possible to go through the island and have a wonderful lunch by the water's edge. Go to Mercy, which is a wonderful little restaurant that has been built out of containers. And they've put together a wonderful patio outdoor area. And you can have great food right by the ocean, and it's a great way to spend a sunny day on Treasure Island. That is possible now.
So, Fei, you've got this incredibly exciting project. Everybody who does something that's, pardon the pun, but groundbreaking, has worries. Give me some worries. What does Fei worry about when your brow gets furrowed? What's the concern?
Well, this is certainly a very ambitious plan that's going to take several decades to put together. And it depends on the health of the private developments, because they are subsidizing the affordable housing developments. And the affordable housing developments also have to get subsidies from local, state, and federal levels in order to meet the affordability. We felt that it was very important that you had a holistic neighborhood, that it wasn't just about luxury housing, because that is what developers want to build, because they get profit from that. But we need to have affordability as well. And so the affordability is a very important part of the overall process. Now, we don't know what the economics will be in the future. There's going to be cycles. There's going to be some good times. There's going to be some bad times, as we've had in the past as well. And so the overall finishing of the plan and the implementation of the plan does depend on the economic health of the city as well.
So when the public-private partnership that created the Presidio was put in place, it was Nancy Pelosi's office that really championed a lot of that. And that was an amazing project, because now, as I understand it, the Presidio is one of the park systems in the country that's actually a teeny bit profitable. Actually, it pays for itself, which is the key issue there. And it is your goal to have this space also pay for itself because of the public-private partnership. If I got that correct?
Yes,
So,
that's yes. We have a private public partnership where the private developer is doing the market rate housing, and then through the bond financing, we're paying for the infrastructure and the public realm, the public spaces.
okay.
And through various other subsidy mechanisms, we're also building affordable housing. So it is very much a private-public partnership. The difference, though, between Treasure Island and the Presidio is that Presidio did get national funding, because it was the national park system. It was part of that system. So they did get federal grants to do that. For Treasure Island, we have not had that largesse. And we were doing it really trying to be self-sufficient financially, and through the tax increment financing mechanisms that I was talking about. That's the way that we're building for the infrastructure and improvements.
So now, as a native San Franciscan, I've watched the homeless population in downtown San Francisco dissuade some businesses from wanting to be there. Incredibly exciting new tech businesses who ambitiously wanted to be in downtown San Francisco, don't want to have people on their front porch that are undesirable. How will you control that on this beautiful site, especially if you have low-cost housing? How are you imagining handling that?
Well, in fact, some of the housing that we have on Treasure Island will be for formerly homeless people. So we see that as being supportive housing. There is housing that is supportive housing right now on Treasure Island. Those eventually will be replaced with new housing. So there is a mix. And I would say that Treasure Island is part of the city. it is going to have the same issues that the city has. And so it's an overall solution that Treasure Island itself can't resolve. Is something which has to be done with the city in concert together to deal with these issues.
So which district will it be a part of for voting? Essentially, is it part of the downtown district? Is it part of? Okay.
It is. It's right now, Matt Haney is the city supervisor whose district it is.
Okay. And currently, I saw that you said 8,000 housing units for 8,000 people. Did I get that number right?
It's actually 8,000 housing units over time.
Okay.
That over time, that the full build out, if it ever is fully built out, will be 8,000 housing units. That's what is allowable. That will be for, it depends, on the size of the units, but anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 people.
That was the next question. So the expected population when it's developed would be in the 10, 15, 20,000 population.
Yes.
Okay,
So
gotcha. Okay.
It really is a totally new district, a new neighborhood of San Francisco that's being built. And these types of developments, I think, respond to what the needs are of various communities. When you have this opportunity of building something totally new, and it's such an incredible challenge and actually an incredible opportunity to do something that is innovative and forward-thinking. But yes, it's the largest undertaking, in the city of San Francisco in decades.
So those of us who remember the development of Dogpatch, it's been like the snap of a finger. It's amazing that south of Market, which was a long time in the development, compared to Dogpatch changed into a kind of a med center literally within 10 years. And if you go back 20 years ago, it was really inexpensive real estate there. Your development reminds me a bit of the success of Dogpatch. They took an environment which nobody really believed would house, housing and mixed use office space. And within a decade, it became one of the thriving neighborhoods of San Francisco. Anybody who goes south of Market, 3 or 4 blocks south of the 3rd Street Bridge, discovers there's this whole new, kind of cosmopolitan area of medtech.
I think actually it didn't just take a decade, Ron. It took several decades, but you're right. In the 1990s, people didn't think of going south of Market. It was mostly industrial buildings that were there. They were not residential neighborhoods. But I was much involved in YERBA BUENA Gardens. And I remember at that time, nobody would develop, and not even a private developer wanted to go and develop south of Market. And that was in the early 1990s, and how that has changed over time. But it has to do with also planning and forward thinking, because you had then Mission Bay, and then you had, the Dogpatch area, and they needed to be connected by transit. And so now that you've got the 3rd Street light rail that goes to that area, it makes it more feasible for that area to be developed.
Right. I remember when we used to go to a little restaurant on 3rd Street by the 3rd Street Bridge, and it was kind of a remote area south of Market. I had an office in the 70s and 80s south of Market, and another one in the teens south of Market. And in both cases, we would have, you could have missed the bet of thinking what was going to happen south of the river in the Dogpatch area. Your area is similar. It's got incredible potential. And we wish you nothing but the best of luck. And we also want to congratulate you for what an incredibly forward vision of what can happen with a new neighborhood in San Francisco. It's been a pleasure having you on the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. And we couldn't have more smiles hoping for your success.
Thank you so much. We are very excited because this year, in particular these last 2 years, we've really seen the construction happen. It's been so much planning, then there was a geotechnical work, and now we're seeing streets being done. We're seeing new gardens being built, you know, the stormwater gardens. We are seeing the infrastructure going in, and the new housing, both the luxury as well as the affordable housing. And it is really the start of this new district for San Francisco. We're very excited. And I think that the city did adopt a very forward-thinking plan, which was innovative and sustainable. And I think that it's going to stand the test of time.
So do you want people to come visit now, or you want them to come visit in 6 months? When do you want to have people come? And then separately, when can we start tying up boats in that nice harbor? Because I've sailed in the Cove. It's very cool.
That's right. Well, the Cove, let me just say it because I didn't talk a little bit about that. The Cove, there is a new marina that is going to be built in that Cove. The first plan was actually for 400 slips, but that Cove is so precious, and it's shared by others. It's shared by the nonprofit sailing center that uses that Cove. It's shared by kayakers and others. And so we wanted them to come back with a compromise, which they did. And they've reduced that marina. It's now about 170, 180 slips. But what will happen is that the Cove will be certainly still available for all the other users, including the sailing center. And that's what we wanted to see, was that there was public access to that Cove. There will be there will be a 10-foot channel to come in, and which has to be dredged, that will come into that Cove and the marina. But there's much that is being planned along the promenade, that there will be retail as well, so that people who are visiting, you know, can use it as well.
What an exciting, ambitious project. Holy moly. Well, thanks very much for visiting with us on the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. And with that, the luncheon's adjourned.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.